In the ruthless hierarchy of Manhattan's elite, Evelyn Street Clare wasn't just a socialite, she was a predator. With a husband who owned half the skyline and a temper that could shatter careers, she treated service staff like furniture, objects to be used, broken, and discarded. But the thing about treating people like invisible objects is that you never notice when one of them is watching you back. When a clumsy new waitress named Mia spilled a drop of wine on Evelyn's Chanel suit, everyone expected a slaughter. No one expected that the waitress held a secret that would turn the predator into the prey. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a fortress of solitude for the 0.1%, tucked away behind an unmarked black door on East 64th Street, right off Madison Avenue. It was the kind of place where the menu had no prices, and the water list was more extensive than most people's retirement funds. The lighting was low, the velvet banquettes were deep crimson, and the air smelled of truffle oil and fear. At exactly 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, the atmosphere in the dining room shifted. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the silence rippled outward from the entrance like a shockwave. Evelyn Street Clare had arrived. She didn't walk. She glided, her heels, custom Louboutins with red soles that looked like fresh blood, clicking a sharp, military rhythm against the marble floor. She was wearing a structured white blazer from the latest Alexander McQueen collection, draped over her shoulders like a cape, and on her arm hung a Himalayan Birkin bag, an accessory worth more than the average American home. Table 9. She whispered to the maitre d', a man named Julian who had managed Michelin-starred restaurants in Paris and Tokyo but currently looked as if he might vomit. "Of course, Mrs. Street Clare." "Right this way," Julian said, bowing his head. He snapped his fingers behind his back, a silent panic signal to the floor staff. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Evelyn was the wife of Marcus Street Clare, the CEO of St. Clair Holdings, a conglomerate that swallowed tech startups for breakfast. But Evelyn was the true power. She was known as the guillotine among the service industry of New York. A wrong look, a cold soup, or a smudge on a glass didn't just get you fired. She would ensure you were blacklisted from every luxury establishment from Tribeca to the Hamptons. Tonight, however, there was a variable Julian hadn't accounted for. "Julian," Evelyn said, sliding into the booth without looking at him. She picked up the heavy linen napkin and inspected it for lint. "Where's Marco? He usually pours my water." "Marco is unfortunately out with the flu tonight, Mrs. Street Clare," Julian stammered. "But fear not. I have assigned our most diligent server to your table. She is new, but highly recommended." Evelyn dropped the napkin. She looked up, her ice-blue eyes narrowing. "New?" "She is excellent," Julian lied, sweating. From the shadows of the service station, a young woman stepped forward. She looked remarkably plain compared to the glitz of the room. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, practical bun. Her uniform was crisp, but it hung slightly loose on her slender frame. She wore thick-rimmed glasses that obscured her eyes, and her posture was hunched, almost submissive. Her name tag read, Mia. "Good evening, Mrs. Street Clare," Mia said. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. She held a crystal pitcher of water with a trembling hand. "Welcome to the Obsidian Room." Evelyn didn't respond. She simply stared at Mia, scanning her from her sensible non-slip shoes to the loose collar of her shirt. Evelyn's lip curled in disgust. It was the look a lioness might give a particularly weak gazelle. "Is this a joke, Julian?" Evelyn asked, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz music. "She's shaking. Look at the water. It's vibrating." "I apologize, Mrs. St. Clair," Mia said, bowing her head quickly. I've heard so much about you. I want to make sure everything is perfect." "You've heard of me?" Evelyn laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Good. Then you know that I despise incompetence. Pour the water. If you spill a single drop, you won't just lose this job. I will ensure you never work in a place that serves anything more expensive than a cheeseburger again." Mia nodded. She stepped forward, the heavy crystal pitcher in her hand. She leaned over the table. The water poured in a smooth, clear arc into the baccarat crystal glass. It was perfect, until the very last second. As Mia pulled the pitcher back, her elbow seemed to twitch. A single, solitary droplet of ice water detached itself from the lip of the pitcher. It fell in slow motion, landing directly on the sleeve of Evelyn's pristine white Alexander McQueen blazer. The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier than the silence that had greeted Evelyn's arrival. A fork clattered onto a plate 3 tables away. Evelyn stared at the tiny, darkening spot on her sleeve. She touched it with a manicured finger, as if confirming it was real. Then she looked up at Mia. "You," Evelyn hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You stupid, clumsy little peasant." Mia gasped, clutching the pitcher to her chest. "I am so sorry. Please, let me get a cloth." "Don't you touch me," Evelyn shrieked, standing up. The sound of her chair scraping back drew the eyes of everyone in the room. Hedge fund managers, Broadway stars, politicians. "Do you know how much this jacket costs? It costs more than your entire life's earnings. Julian." Julian materialized instantly, looking pale. "Mrs. Streetclair, I am mortified. Get this trash out of my sight." Evelyn pointed a diamond-encrusted finger at Mia. "And I don't just want her fired. I want the owner's number. I want to speak to the Saint. Claire Holdings Legal Department. I am suing this establishment for emotional distress and property damage." Mia shrank back, her eyes wide behind her glasses. "Please, ma'am. I really need this job. My mother is sick. I can pay for the dry cleaning." "Dry cleaning?" Evelyn scoffed, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "You think you dry clean haute couture? You burn it and buy a new one. But you wouldn't know that, would you? You probably shop at a landfill." Evelyn grabbed her glass of wine, a 2005 Chateau Margaux that had been pre-poured, and in a fit of theatrical rage, she splashed the red liquid onto the floor, right over Mia's shoes. "Now we're even," Evelyn sneered. "Clean it up, on your knees." The room was paralyzed. This was a new low, even for Evelyn. Mia stood still. For a fleeting second, the trembling stopped. Behind the thick glasses, her eyes sharpened, losing that doe-eyed fear. But it happened so fast that only Julian noticed it, and he was too terrified to process it. Mia slowly lowered herself to her knees. Taking a white cloth from her apron, she began to dab at the wine on the floor near Evelyn's red-soled heels. "That's right," Evelyn said, sitting back down, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. "Know your place." But as Mia wiped the floor, she whispered something. It was soft, spoken in flawless, rapid-fire Italian, a dialect specific to the Lombardy region where Evelyn's husband did his offshore banking. "La superbia viene prima della caduta, signora." Pride comes before the fall, madam. Evelyn froze. She looked down. "What did you say?" Mia looked up, the fear back in her eyes, her voice shaking again. "I said, I'm cleaning it as fast as I can, ma'am." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. She must have misheard. There was no way this clumsy waitress knew Italian, let alone the dialect of the banking elite. Evelyn kicked Mia's hand away with her heel. "Get up! You're ruining my appetite. Julian, bring me a fresh bottle, and bring me the manager. I want to watch you fire her." 10 minutes later, the tension in the obsidian room had shifted from shock to a morbid curiosity. The wealthy patrons were pretending to eat their Wagyu beef and lobster risottos, but every ear was tuned to Table 9. Mia had not been fired. Not yet. Through a bizarre bureaucratic loophole that Julian had nervously explained, the general manager was currently on a flight from London and had to give the final authorization for any termination. Until then, Mia had to finish her shift, though she was restricted to the back stations. But Evelyn Streetclair wasn't done playing with her food. She demanded that Mia stay at her table. She wanted to savor the humiliation. "Since you're so incompetent at pouring water," Evelyn said, swirling her fresh glass of wine. "Let's see if you have a brain in that head. Do you know what you're serving me?" Mia stood by the table, hands clasped behind her back. "It is a 2005 Chateau Margaux, ma'am, a Premier Grand Cru Classé from Bordeaux." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Anyone can read a label. Describe it to me." "It is red wine, ma'am. Very expensive." Mia stuttered intentionally, lowering her head. Evelyn laughed, looking around at the nearby tables, inviting them to join in her mockery. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Pathetic. It has notes of black currant, truffle, and smoked earth. It requires a palate of sophistication, something you clearly lack. Tell me, what is the most expensive wine you've ever tasted? Boxed Merlot? Actually, Mia said, her voice suddenly steady, dropping the stutter, the 2005 Margaux is excellent. However, the bottle you are drinking is slightly corked. I can smell the wet cardboard taint from here. It's faint, but for a palate of true sophistication, it should be undeniable. The restaurant went silent again. Evelyn's face turned a shade of crimson that matched the wine. "Excuse me, are you telling me my wine is bad? I have been drinking wines from this vineyard since before you were born." "I am simply stating a fact," Mia said, adjusting her glasses. 2, 4, 6, trichloroanazole, cork taint. It masks the fruit notes. You mentioned blackcurrant, but if you actually taste it, you'll find the finish is flat. But perhaps you didn't notice? The insult was subtle but devastating. Mia was implying Evelyn couldn't taste the difference between a $2,000 bottle of wine and vinegar. Evelyn slammed the glass down. "Julian, come here!" Julian rushed over. "Yes, Mrs. Street Claire?" "This insolent girl claims the bottle is corked. She is trying to embarrass me. Tell her she's wrong. Taste it." Julian looked at the glass, then at Evelyn, then at Mia. He picked up the glass and took a small sip. He swirled it. His eyes widened slightly. It was corked. Subtly, but it was there. But Julian knew who paid the bills. He looked at Evelyn's furious face. If he agreed with the waitress, Evelyn would destroy the restaurant. "The wine is perfect, Mrs. Street Claire," Julian lied smoothly. "Exquisite condition." Evelyn turned to Mia with a triumphant grin. "You see, you are a liar and a fraud. You're just trying to make yourself look smart. You are nothing." Mia didn't flinch. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound notepad. She uncapped a pen. "What are you doing?" Evelyn snapped. "Just taking notes, Mrs. Street Claire," Mia said, "for the kitchen." "You're writing an apology letter," Evelyn corrected her, "and you're going to read it out loud to the entire restaurant." "No," Mia said softly. "I'm writing down the time you lied about the wine quality to save face. 7:42 p.m. Evelyn stood up, her chair crashing backward. "That is it. I don't care about the manager. Get out! Get out of this restaurant right now. I will have security drag you out by your hair." "I wouldn't do that," Mia said. She took off her thick glasses and placed them on the table. Without the frames, her face changed. Her eyes were striking, intelligent, and cold as ice. She pulled a hair tie from her bun, shaking her hair loose. It cascaded over her shoulders, shiny and perfectly styled. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. And why is that? Evelyn screamed, drawing the attention of the two large security guards by the door. "Are you going to stop me?" "No," Mia said, her voice projecting clearly across the room, carrying a tone of authority that made Julian freeze. "But I think your husband Marcus might be upset if you caused a scene right now, especially considering who he is currently meeting with in the private dining room downstairs." Evelyn froze. "Marcus is in San Francisco. He's on a business trip." Mia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Is he?" Because according to the reservation log, Mr. Marcus Street Claire is in the Platinum Vault downstairs. And he's not discussing business. He's celebrating his 3-year anniversary. But wait. Mia tapped her chin theatrically. "You and Marcus have been married for 10 years. So who is he celebrating a 3-year anniversary with?" The blood drained from Evelyn's face. The whispers in the room exploded into a dull roar of gossip. "You're lying," Evelyn whispered. "He's in California." "The Platinum Vault has a direct video feed to the security station," Mia said, pointing to a small tablet on the waiter's station. "Would you like to see?" Evelyn looked at the tablet, then at the stairs leading to the private rooms. Her arrogance was warring with her insecurity. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded. her voice shaking. "How do you have access to the logs? Waitresses don't see the VIP list." Mia took a step closer to Evelyn. She wasn't hunching anymore. She stood taller than Evelyn, even without the red-soled heels. "I'm not just a waitress, Evelyn," Mia said, dropping the Mrs. Street Claire entirely. "And you're right, the wine was corked, but you drank it anyway because you care more about the label than the truth, just like your marriage." "Security!" Evelyn shrieked, panic setting in. "Remove her!" The security guard stepped forward, looking uncertain. "I wouldn't touch her if I were you." A deep voice boomed from the entrance of the kitchen. Everyone turned. The chef de cuisine, a legend named Gordon who rarely left his kitchen, walked out. But he wasn't looking at Evelyn. He was looking at Mia. "Chef." Mia nodded. "Miss Vance," the chef replied respectfully. "Vance?" Evelyn repeated the name, her brow furrowing. "Vance. Like Vance Global?" Mia picked up the corked bottle of Chateau Margaux. She inspected the label. "Vance Global owns the building we are standing in, Evelyn," Mia said calmly. "They also own the bank that holds the mortgage on your Hamptons estate. And, interestingly enough, Vance Global just acquired a majority stake in St. Clair Holdings this morning." Mia poured the rest of the expensive wine into a nearby plant pot. "Which means," Mia said, looking Evelyn dead in the eye, "technically, I'm your husband's boss. And yours." The revelation hung in the air of the obsidian room like toxic smoke. Mia Vance. The name was legendary in financial circles. Her father, Atticus Vance, was a modern-day Rockefeller, a man whose shadow loomed over Wall Street. Mia was his only heir, a ghost in the social scene who was rumored to be running the empire from behind the scenes while her father fought illness in Switzerland. And Evelyn Street Claire had just made her clean wine off the floor. Evelyn looked around the room, desperately seeking an ally. She looked at Julian, the maitre d'. He was studying his shoes, visibly trying to shrink into the floorboards. She looked at Chef Gordon, who was standing next to Mia like a Praetorian guard, his arms crossed over his chef's whites. "This is ridiculous." Evelyn tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled choke. "Vance Global, you're a waitress in polyester. You're hallucinating. Julian, call the police. She's an imposter and a stalker." Mia didn't even look at Evelyn. She turned to Chef Gordon. "Chef, the Dover sole at table 4 is lagging, and table 7 needs their second bottle of Dom Perignon iced immediately." "Yes, Miss Vance." "Right away." Chef Gordon boomed, turning on his heel and marching back into the kitchen, barking orders at his brigade. The shift in power was absolute. The staff wasn't listening to the millionaire's wife anymore. They were listening to the landlord. Mia turned back to Evelyn. The thick glasses were gone, and the meek posture had vanished completely. Mia stood with the unconscious grace of someone who had grown up in boardrooms and ballrooms, someone who knew that true power didn't need to shout. "You have two choices, Evelyn," Mia said calmly. "You can finish your mediocre, corked wine alone upstairs while the entire room whispers about your imminent divorce. Or you can come downstairs with me and face the reality you've been ignoring for 3 years." Evelyn's grip on the table was so tight her knuckles turned white. Her world, meticulously constructed of designer labels and social intimidation, was cracking at the foundation. If what this girl said was true, if Marcus was downstairs, if the company was sold, Evelyn was finished. "Show me," Evelyn hissed. It wasn't a demand. It was a surrender to morbid curiosity. Mia nodded once and walked toward the kitchen entrance, past the stunned security guards who stepped aside hastily. Evelyn followed, dragging her expensive Birkin bag like a dead weight. They didn't go into the main kitchen. Mia led her down a narrow service corridor, lined with humming refrigerators and stacked crates of imported produce. It smelled of raw fish and bleach, the unglamorous underbelly of luxury. They reached a heavy, soundproofed steel door marked "Private, Staff Only." Mia punched a code into a keypad. The door clicked open, revealing a carpeted staircase bathed in soft amber light. This was the entrance to the Platinum Vaults, the subterranean private dining rooms reserved for deals too sensitive for the main floor and affairs too illicit for hotels. As they descended, the air became cooler, scented with expensive oud wood candles. The sounds of the restaurant above faded into silence. "I've been working here for 3 weeks, Evelyn," Mia said quietly as they walked down the stairs. Her voice echoed slightly in the stairwell. "Undercover CEO protocols. My father insisted. We were looking into the St. Clair Holdings acquisition, and the due diligence numbers weren't adding up. Your husband's company is hemorrhaging money. He's leveraged everything, including your personal assets, to keep the stock price inflated." Evelyn stopped on a step, clutching the railing. "That's a lie. Marcus is a genius. We have houses in Aspen, in St. Bart's." "Mortgaged to the hilt," Mia corrected. "All owned by shell companies that are currently defaulting. Marcus needed the Vance Global buyout to avoid prison for securities fraud. He was desperate. But we don't buy companies run by desperate, unethical people." "What does this have to do with me?" Evelyn cried out. "I don't run the company." Mia turned on the stairs, looking up at Evelyn. "No, you just spend the money he steals. And you treat the people you think are beneath you like garbage. My father has a strict policy. The culture of a company starts at the top. And the St. Clair culture is rotten. I went undercover to see how rotten. I expected bad management. I didn't expect you." They reached the bottom of the stairs. A long hallway stretched out, lined with 4 identical mahogany doors. Mia walked to the third door. A brass plaque read, "Vault C." She didn't knock. Mia threw the door open. The room was opulent, a jewel box of dark wood and gold accents. A domed ceiling painted with Renaissance frescoes hung over a circular table set for 2. A bucket of ice held an open bottle of Krug champagne. Marcus Street Clair, a handsome man in his late 40s with silver-tinged hair and a suit that cost more than a car, was laughing. He was leaning over the table, holding the hand of a woman who was definitely not Evelyn. The woman was younger, perhaps 25, with platinum blonde hair and a dress cut down to her navel. Evelyn recognized her instantly. It was Serena Jenkins, an Instagram model and social climber whom Evelyn had condescendingly allowed into her circle a few times as an amusement. Evelyn had even given her an old Prada handbag once, as charity. Marcus froze, a champagne flute halfway to his lips. His eyes darted from Mia to Evelyn, his brain failing to process the intrusion. "Evelyn?" Marcus croaked. Then he looked at Mia, confused by the waiter uniform minus the glasses. "And the waitress? What the hell is going on? Julian, security!" "Security isn't coming, Marcus," Mia said, walking into the room and standing by the head of the table. "And I'm not just the waitress." Evelyn stepped into the room. The sight of Serena wearing a diamond bracelet that looked suspiciously like the one Marcus had claimed was in the safety deposit box snapped the last thread of her composure. Evelyn didn't scream. She went cold. The predator was back, but this time she was truly cornered. "Serena," Evelyn said, her voice terrifyingly flat. "That's a lovely bracelet." "Is it new?" Serena snatched her hand away from Marcus, looking terrified. "Evelyn, oh my God, this isn't... Marcus said you were in Europe." Marcus stood up, knocking over his chair. "Evelyn, honey, listen, it's a misunderstanding. I was just mentoring Serena for her business." "Mentoring her?" Evelyn walked slowly around the table. She picked up Serena's discarded silk wrap. 3 years, Marcus. That's what the waitress said. 3 years you've been mentoring this little gold-digging parasite in a basement?" "It's not 3 years," Marcus shouted, glaring at Mia. "Who told you that? This crazy waitress? You're going to believe staff over me?" Mia leaned against the mahogany wall, arms crossed. "Actually, Marcus, I got that number from your reservation history. You're quite a regular here, Mr. Smith and Guest, every Tuesday when Evelyn is at her charity board meetings. And before Serena it was... Let me check my notes." Mia pulled out the small notebook again. "A, Miss Tanya Roberts, for 6 months in 2022, and a Candy, no last name, for most of 2021. Marcus turned purple. You stole confidential customer data. I'll have you arrested. Who is your manager? Mia laughed. It was a genuine, amused laugh that chilled Marcus to the bone. Oh, Marcus, Mia said, shaking her head. You still don't get it. I don't have a manager. I own the restaurant. I own the building. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, I own the debt on St. Clair Holdings. Marcus stopped breathing. He stared at Mia, really looking at her for the first time, seeing the resemblance to the Titan Atticus Vance. The color drained from his face faster than the wine Evelyn had spilled upstairs. Vance? Marcus whispered. Mia Vance? But why were you serving water? Research, Mia said. And I have to say, the results are disappointing. The silence in Vault C was heavier than the subterranean rock surrounding it. The only sound was the faint hum of the intricate air filtration system, designed to keep the scent of expensive scandal from reaching the street level. Serena Jenkins, realizing the gravity of the situation, tried to slide out of her chair. I should go. Marcus, call me when... Sit down, Serena, Evelyn snapped, without looking at her. The sheer force of Evelyn's command froze the younger woman in place. Evelyn's eyes were fixed on her husband, a man she suddenly realized she didn't know at all. Marcus was trembling. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at Mia, the arbiter of his fate. The acquisition by Vance Global was his only lifeboat. Without it, the Ponzi-like structure of his debts would collapse within a week. Mia, Miss Vance, Marcus began, his voice taking on the oily sheen of a desperate salesman. This is awkward. But surely my personal life has no bearing on the business merger. St. Clair Holdings is a solid asset. The synergy with Vance Global is undeniable. Let's not let a little domestic dispute derail a billion-dollar deal. Mia walked over to the table and picked up the bottle of Krug. She examined the label thoughtfully, ignoring his plea. You know, Marcus, you have expensive taste, Mia said. This room costs $5,000 just to reserve. The champagne is another $800. The bracelet on Serena's wrist is easily $50,000. And yet, according to the files I reviewed this afternoon, you haven't paid your corporate taxes in 2 years. That's creative accounting. Everyone does it, Marcus stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. And Evelyn, Mia continued, turning to the woman who was still staring daggers at her husband. You spent $12,000 on a jacket today. A jacket you forced me to clean on my knees because of a drop of water. You berated 14 different staff members in the last 2 weeks alone. I've kept a tally. You called Marco sluggish incompetence because he had the flu. You made the coat check girl cry because she didn't retrieve your furs fast enough. Evelyn looked at Mia, her anger momentarily diverted from Marcus. They are paid to serve me. If they can't do their jobs, they deserve criticism. They are human beings trying to make a living, Evelyn. Mia's voice hardened. Something you've never had to do. You think your wealth buys you the right to dehumanize people. You think you're untouchable because of who you married. Mia dropped the notebook onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. You both think you're above the rules. Marcus thinks he can defraud investors and cheat on his wife in my basement. You think you can treat working-class people like accessories to be abused. You are both rotten to the core. Get to the point, Miss Vance, Marcus demanded, trying to regain some shred of authority. What do you want? A discount on the acquisition price? Fine, we can knock off 5%. Mia smiled, a cold, predatory smile that rivaled anything Evelyn had ever produced. The acquisition is conditional, Marcus. Did you read the fine print of the term sheet we signed last week? Specifically, Section 14, Paragraph B? Marcus blinked. The standard clauses, force majeure, regulatory approval. The morality and reputational risk clause, Mia clarified. It states that Vance Global reserves the right to pull out of the deal unilaterally, without penalty, if we discover any information about the key principles, that's you and Evelyn, that could bring reputational damage to the parent company, or if we discover gross unethical behavior. Mia gestured around the room. Fraud, tax evasion, adultery in the company-owned building. And let's not forget Evelyn's widely known reputation as the guillotine of Manhattan dining. which is about to become very public when I release the security footage of her splashing wine on a waitress and forcing her to her knees." Evelyn gasped. "You wouldn't dared. That's an invasion of privacy." "It's a public restaurant, Evelyn. There is no expectation of privacy in the main dining room. The cameras are everywhere, and I own the footage." Mia leaned closer. "I have you on tape admitting you couldn't tell a corked wine from a good one. Imagine what that will do to your standing on the Met Gala committee." The social threat hit Evelyn harder than the financial one. Her reputation was her currency. Marcus looked sick. "If you pull out of the deal now, the news will leak. The stock will tank. The creditors will call in the loans." "Exactly," Mia said. "St. Clair Holdings will be insolvent by Friday." "You'll bankrupt us," Marcus shouted. "We'll lose everything." "No, Marcus," Mia said calmly. "You already lost everything when you decided to leverage your future on lies and debt. I'm just the one turning on the lights so everyone can see the mess." Serena, sensing the ship was definitely sinking, finally stood up. "Marcus, I have to go. Don't call me." She grabbed her fake Prada bag and bolted for the door, leaving her sugar daddy to drown. Marcus didn't even watch her go. He looked at Evelyn, pleadingly. "Evelyn, honey, you have to help me. Talk to her woman to woman. Tell her we can fix this." Evelyn slowly turned her gaze from the door where Serena had fled back to her husband. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold volcanic fury. She had been humiliated upstairs by a waitress. She had been humiliated downstairs by her husband. She had lost her social standing, her financial security, and her dignity in the span of an hour. And she realized, with crystal clarity, who was to blame. It wasn't Mia Vance. Mia was just the executioner. Marcus was the one who had committed the crimes. Evelyn walked over to where Marcus was sitting. She looked down at him with the same disdain she usually reserved for slow valets. "Help you?" Evelyn whispered. She picked up the forgotten glass of Krug champagne that Marcus had been about to toast his mistress with. "You humiliated me, Marcus. You let me walk around this city acting like a queen while you knew we were paupers. You let me terrorize waitresses over the cost of a jacket when you knew the bank was about to repossess it." Evelyn raised the glass. Marcus flinched, expecting her to throw the champagne in his face. Instead, she poured it slowly, deliberately into his lap. Marcus yelped, jumping up, his expensive Italian trousers ruined. "Evelyn, are you crazy?" Evelyn turned to Mia. Her face was a mask of icy resolve. "Miss Vance," Evelyn said, her voice steady, "if you bankrupt his company, does that mean his personal assets are seized too?" "Yes," Mia confirmed. "The house in the Hamptons, the penthouse, the cars, the art collection, all of it is collateral." A strange, bitter smile twisted Evelyn's lips. "Good," Evelyn said. "Burn it all down. I'd rather live in a studio apartment in Queens than spend another minute pretending this pathetic worm is a king." Evelyn looked at her husband one last time. "I'm calling my lawyer, not to help you, Marcus, to divorce you before the feds get here. I want half of whatever is left, even if it's just debt." Evelyn grabbed her Birkin bag, turned on her red-soled heel, and marched toward the door. As she passed Mia, she paused. For a second, the two women, the fallen socialite and the secret heiress, locked eyes. There was no apology in Evelyn's eyes, but there was a flicker of grudging respect. "The wine upstairs," Evelyn murmured. "It really was corked, wasn't it?" "Yes," Mia said. "It smelled like wet dog." Evelyn gave a short, sharp nod. "I should have known. Marcus always orders the cheapest bottles on the expensive list." With that, Evelyn walked out of the vault, leaving her husband alone with the woman who had just destroyed his life. Mia looked at Marcus, who was standing in a puddle of champagne, utterly defeated. "You should probably call your lawyers, Marcus," Mia said, turning to leave. "And you'll need to pay the bill for the room before you leave. We don't extend credit to bankrupt patrons." The sun rose over Central Park the next morning with a cruel, brilliant clarity, illuminating the triplex penthouse that Evelyn St. Clair had called home for a decade. But the light didn't bring warmth. It brought exposure. Evelyn awoke not to the smell of fresh Colombian roast coffee prepared by her housekeeper, Marta, but to the sound of shouting. She sat up in her California king bed, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than a Honda Civic. Her head throbbed. The memory of the previous night, the basement, the waitress, the champagne in Marcus's lap, hit her like a physical blow. She reached for the buzzer on her nightstand to summon Marta. "Marta, what is that racket?" Evelyn screamed at the intercom. "Silence! Marta!" Frustrated, Evelyn threw off the covers and grabbed her silk robe. She marched out of the bedroom, ready to fire Marta on the spot. But as she reached the top of the grand staircase that overlooked the living room, she froze. The living room wasn't empty. It was full of men in dark windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. Asset forfeiture. And in the middle of them stood Marcus, still wearing his champagne-stained trousers from the night before, looking like a man who had aged 20 years in 8 hours. He was being handcuffed. "What is going on?" Evelyn shrieked, descending the stairs. "Who let these people in? Get your hands off my husband." "Well, actually, keep them on, but get out of my house." A tall agent with a buzz cut looked up. "Mrs. Street Claire? I'm Special Agent Miller. We are executing a federal warrant for the seizure of assets related to the St. Clair Holdings fraud investigation. We're also freezing all accounts associated with the estate." "Fraud?" Evelyn scoffed, though her stomach turned to ice. "My husband is a businessman. A bad one, perhaps, but not a criminal. The forensic accounting files delivered to our office at 2 a.m. this morning say otherwise," Agent Miller said dryly. "The tip came from a very credible source. A Miss Vance." Evelyn gripped the banister. Mia. She hadn't just canceled the deal. She had hand-delivered the evidence to the feds while Evelyn was sleeping. "You can't take the house," Evelyn stammered. "It's in my name. The deed is in the St. Clair Trust." "The trust is funded by illicit proceeds from the shell companies," Miller explained, signaling his team to start tagging the furniture. A man was already putting a sticker on the grand piano. "It's all proceeds of crime, ma'am. You have 1 hour to pack a bag of personal essentials. No jewelry, no luxury goods, no electronics purchased with company funds, just clothes and toiletries." 1 hour? Evelyn gasped. "I have a luncheon at the Pierre Hotel at noon." "I don't think you'll be making that, ma'am," Miller said. "And I suggest you check your phone." Evelyn ran back upstairs and grabbed her phone. It had exploded with notifications. But they weren't messages of support. Page 6. The Millionaire's Mess, Marcus Street Clair, arrested for massive Ponzi scheme. Daily Mail. The guillotine falls. Video leaked of socialite Evelyn Street Clair abusing staff moments before empire collapses. Evelyn stopped breathing. She clicked the link on the Daily Mail article. There it was, the grainy but unmistakable security footage from the Obsidian Room. It showed Evelyn splashing the wine on the floor. It showed her pointing her finger, her face twisted in a snarl. It showed Mia, sweet, humble Mia, on her knees, scrubbing the floor while Evelyn sat above her like a tyrant. The video had 4 million views. The comments were a bloodbath. "Eat the rich." "I hope she loses everything." "I used to work for a caterer she hired. She made me cry because the ice wasn't square enough. Karma is here." "Who is the waitress?" "She handled that with so much class. #TMia." Evelyn threw the phone onto the bed. It wasn't just the money. The money she could have maybe survived, or married again to get back. But this was social annihilation. She was the most hated woman in New York City. She frantically opened her closet. She grabbed a Louis Vuitton suitcase and started stuffing it. "Not that one," an agent said from the doorway. He was holding a clipboard. "The luggage is listed as an asset. You'll have to use a trash bag, ma'am." Evelyn stared at him. "Hey, trash bag. Unless you have something non-designer." Evelyn Street Clair, the queen of Madison Avenue, left her penthouse 45 minutes later. She was wearing sweatpants, the only thing she owned that didn't have a logo seized by the feds, and carrying a black, hefty trash bag filled with underwear and a toothbrush. As she stepped out of the building lobby, a wall of camera flashes blinded her. The paparazzi were there. Evelyn, did you know about the fraud?" "How does it feel to be homeless?" Do you regret pouring the wine?" She lowered her head and pushed through the crowd, looking for her limousine. But the driver, seasoned and unpaid for 2 months, was nowhere to be found. The car was gone. She was alone on the sidewalk. A woman in a nurse's uniform walking by stopped, looked at Evelyn, and then looked at the trash bag. "Hey," the nurse said. "Aren't you the lady from the video, the one who made the girl clean up wine?" Evelyn didn't answer. She tried to hail a taxi. The nurse spat on the sidewalk, inches from Evelyn's sneaker. "Karma's a bitch, honey. Don't slip." 3 days later, the reality of poverty had set in with the speed of a crashing stock market. Evelyn was staying in a motel in New Jersey. It was the only place she could afford with the $400 in cash she had managed to hide in her sock before the feds took her purse. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. The sheets were scratchy polyesters that made her skin crawl, a karmic echo of the complaint she'd made about the tablecloths at the Met Gala 2 years prior. She sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at the one item she had managed to smuggle out, a Rolex Daytona watch. It was a men's watch, one of Marcus's, which she had grabbed from the dresser in a panic. It was worth easily $25,000. It was her ticket back, or at least her ticket to a decent hotel. She put on a baseball cap and sunglasses, terrified of being recognized, and took a bus back into the city. She headed straight for the Diamond District on 47th Street. She walked into Goldman & Sons, a reputable pawnbroker where Marcus had bought several pieces in the past. She approached the counter, trying to project her old authority. "I need to sell this," Evelyn said, sliding the heavy gold watch across the glass counter. "I expect a fair price. I know the owner." The pawnbroker, a grizzled man named Saul, picked up the watch. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the watch with a jeweler's loupe. He turned it over. He unscrewed the back. He sighed and slid it back to her. "I can give you $50 for the gold weight," Saul said. Evelyn's jaw dropped. $50? Are you insane? That is a Rolex Daytona. It's solid gold. My husband paid $30,000 for it. Saul looked up, adjusting his glasses. He recognized her then. The disgraced Mrs. Street Clare. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Lady," Saul said, his voice loud enough for the other customers to hear. "Your husband might have told you he paid 30 grand. But this is a Canal Street knockoff. The movement is Chinese quartz. The gold is plated. It's fake." "That's impossible," Evelyn whispered. "Marcus, he wouldn't." "He's a fraud, lady," Saul said, turning back to his paperwork. "Why would his jewelry be any different? He probably spent the real money on the girlfriends." The girlfriends. Serena. The image of the platinum blonde in the basement flashed in Evelyn's mind. Marcus had given Serena a diamond bracelet. Was that fake too? Or did the mistress get the real jewels while the wife got the counterfeits? Evelyn snatched the fake watch and ran out of the store, tears stinging her eyes behind her sunglasses. She stumbled onto the sidewalk, gasping for air. She had nothing. No money, no home, no assets, and apparently she had never even had a real marriage. Her stomach grumbled violently. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. She walked aimlessly, dazed, until she found herself standing in front of a familiar black door on East 64th Street. The Obsidian Room. She didn't know why she came here. Maybe she wanted to scream at Mia. Maybe she wanted to beg. The door opened, and Julian, the maitre d', stepped out. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo. He was wearing jeans and carrying a box of personal belongings. Evelyn stepped into his path. Julian jumped, nearly dropping his box. He looked at Evelyn, the sweatpants, the messy hair, the desperation. "Mrs. Street Clare," he said, his voice devoid of the obsequious tone he used to use. "You're leaving?" Evelyn asked. "Fired," Julian said bitterly. "Miss Vance cleaned house. Everyone who was complicit in your special treatment was let go. She said she wanted a staff that respected dignity, not just tips." "She's a monster," Evelyn spat. "She ruined us." "No," Julian said, shifting the box. "She just stopped pretending. And honestly, I'm glad." I hated the way you treated us. Every time you walked in, my stomach hurt. Goodbye, Evelyn." He didn't call her Mrs. Street Claire. He walked away, merging into the crowd. Evelyn stood alone in front of the restaurant. The door opened again. But this time, it wasn't a fired employee. It was Mia Vance. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a tailored navy power suit, her hair blow-dried to perfection, looking every inch the billionaire CEO. She was flanked by Chef Gordon and a new, stern-looking female manager. Mia stopped when she saw Evelyn. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked pitying, which was worse. "Evelyn," Mia said softly. "Are you happy?" Evelyn hissed, her hands balling into fists. "You took my house. You took my reputation. You even got my husband arrested. Is this enough karma for you?" "I didn't get your husband arrested, Evelyn," Mia replied calmly. "The forensic audit did. I just handed over the paperwork. And I didn't take your reputation. You gave that away every time you snapped your fingers at a waiter." Mia gestured to the restaurant behind her. "We're reopening tonight, under new management, a new name actually, the Glass House, because from now on, everything here is transparent." Evelyn felt the tears coming, hot and humiliating. "I have nowhere to go, Mia. I have $400 and a fake watch. I am hungry." It was the hardest admission Evelyn had ever made. The queen of the Obsidian Room was admitting she was starving on the doorstep of her former kingdom. Mia studied her for a long moment. The silence stretched, filled with the noise of New York traffic. "I won't give you money," Mia said finally. "And I won't give you your status back." Evelyn slumped, turning to walk away. "But," Mia continued, "I will give you a job." Evelyn froze. She turned back slowly. "A job? You want me to work in your office?" "No," Mia said, a small, dry smile touching her lips. "I have enough executives." "I need something else. We're short-staffed in the scullery. The dishwasher quit this morning." Evelyn's face went pale. "You want me to wash dishes? In the back? Like a servant?" "It pays $18 an hour," Mia said, "plus a meal per shift. It's honest work, Evelyn, something you've never done. You'll be in the back, away from the cameras. You can wear a uniform. No one will know it's you." "I can't," Evelyn whispered. "I can't do that." "Then you can sleep on the street," Mia said, checking her watch. A real Patek Philippe. "The shelter on 34th Street fills up by 5 p.m. "I'd hurry if I were you." Mia turned to go back inside. "Wait!" Evelyn cried out. Mia paused, her hand on the heavy black door. Evelyn looked at her hands. They were manicured, soft, useless hands. Hands that had never held anything heavier than a wine glass. Then she thought about the motel room. She thought about the nurse spitting on her. She thought about the gnawing emptiness in her stomach. She had been stripped of her husband, her wealth, and her pride. The only thing left was survival. "I'll take it," Evelyn whispered. Mia nodded. She didn't smile cruelly. She simply held the door open. "Come in through the service entrance," Mia said. "Gordon will get you an apron. And Evelyn?" "Yes?" "If you break a plate," Mia said, her eyes flashing with a reminder of the water pitcher incident, "it comes out of your paycheck." Evelyn Street Claire, the former millionaire's wife, lowered her head and walked toward the alleyway service entrance. As she passed the spot where the paparazzi had been, she realized no one was looking at her anymore. She wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't a target. She was just another invisible worker entering the back of the house, and for the first time in 10 years, she was exactly where she deserved to be. 30 days later, the woman scrubbing a scorched sauté pan in the back of the glasshouse kitchen bore little resemblance to the socialite who had once terrorized Manhattan. Evelyn's expensive manicure was gone, replaced by hands that were red, chapped, and smelled of lemon detergent. Her designer highlights were hidden beneath a hairnet. But as Chef Gordon barked orders, Evelyn moved with a speed she had never possessed in her former life. She had learned that a shift meal eaten standing over a trash can tasted better than any gala dinner, simply because she had earned it. The kitchen doors swung open, and Sarah, a young 19-year-old server, burst in with tears streaming down her face. "I can't go back out there," Sarah sobbed, dropping a tray. "The woman at table 9, she's a monster. She called me an idiot because the ice cubes weren't square." Evelyn froze. She knew that complaint. She used to make that complaint. "Dry your face," Evelyn said, untying her rubber apron. "I'll run the food." "But you're the dishwasher," Sarah stammered. "If she sees you—" "She won't," Evelyn said grimly. "People like that don't look at the help." Evelyn grabbed the plate of risotto and stepped into the dining room. She approached table 9 and stopped. The customer was Clarissa Vanderhoven, Evelyn's former best friend, a woman as cruel and insecure as Evelyn had once been. "Your risotto, madam," Evelyn said, keeping her voice flat. Clarissa didn't look up from her phone. "Finally, tell that incompetent girl she's lucky I don't have her fired." Evelyn stood there. The old Evelyn would have thrown the wine in Clarissa's face. She would have screamed, "Do you know who I am?" But the new Evelyn, Eve the dishwasher, saw Clarissa for what she was, a lonely, miserable bully. "Is there anything else?" Evelyn asked. Clarissa finally looked up. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned Evelyn's face. Do I know you?" Clarissa frowned. "You look like someone I used to know. Evelyn Street Clare?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, madam. I'm just the dishwasher." Clarissa laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "God, no. Of course not. Evelyn Street Clare wouldn't be caught dead in those shoes. Get out of my sight." "Enjoy your meal," Evelyn said, turning away. She didn't feel humiliated. She felt free. As the kitchen door swung shut, she found Mia Vance standing by the pass. Mia had seen everything on the monitors. "You didn't tell her off?" Mia noted. "No," Evelyn said, picking up her sponge. "She's living in a prison of her own making. I don't live there anymore." Mia smiled, a genuine, rare smile. "Gordon says you're the hardest worker we have. He wants to promote you to prep cook. You get to hold a knife instead of a sponge." Evelyn looked at her raw hands, then at the chaotic, loud kitchen that had become her sanctuary. "I'd like that," Evelyn said. "Get back to work, St. Clair," Mia said respectfully. "Yes, chef," Evelyn replied. She turned the faucet on. It wasn't champagne, and she wasn't a millionaire, but for the first time in her life, Evelyn Street Clair was finally clean. What a journey for Evelyn. From the penthouse to the dish pit, she learned the hardest way possible that true worth isn't about what you wear, but how you treat others. While her husband Marcus ended up in a jail cell for his greed, Evelyn found her own strange version of freedom in the steam of the kitchen. It turns out, sometimes you have to lose everything to find the person you are actually meant to be. What do you think? Did Evelyn deserve a second chance, or should Mia have left her on the street? And would you have had the courage to face your old friends while wearing a uniform? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and redemption, please smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.